Hello, it's Lou Collins. Today I've got a video for you. There's a technique using your embossing folders. You may or may not have seen this before, but particularly if you're a new crafter, it's a way of extending the stash that you already have to create different effects. So you're going to need an embossing folder. You're also going to need some ink. Now I prefer to use something like an oxide or a distress ink that's got really high pigmentation, some nice bright bold colours, but also reactive with water. This just helps the spread of the ink during the technique. You're also going to need some cardstock or paper. I'd suggest a smooth one and one that's a decent weight so it can hold onto the liquid that we're going to be applying to it so it doesn't warp too much. So what I'm going to do is open up my embossing folder. Now you'll notice on embossing folders there's two sides to them. So you get the more solid side usually and you get the detailed side. And when you feel these you can easily feel. And it's usually the reverse that's the detailed side because this is what pushes through the cardstock to create the detail on your card. And this side is the complete reverse of that, the opposite. So it'll be the background is the raised part in this. So we're not going to be using the background. So what you actually want to work on here is the back of the embossing folder. So we're working on the texture. Another reason I like to use Distress Oxides rather than say your cat's eye or small little Memento teardrop ink pads is because these are better for getting the surface application and not getting down into the detail here. So what I'm going to do is take a pink, this one's called Saltwater Taffy, and I'm just going to run this ink pad over the top, keeping it as flat as possible, going over the top of the detail. Now don't worry if you get some in the background, it's not the end of the world at all. We'll deal with that in a moment because this has got quite a large area here. So you notice the pad is touching that. Like I say, it doesn't matter, we'll pick that up as best we can in a moment. And then I'm going to come down here. Now you notice where there's lots of detail on your embossing folder, it's nice and easy to just capture really the top. So if you have got large areas as I have and they've caught, just take yourself a little bit of kitchen towel. You've got time, these sort of inks don't tend to dry very quickly at all, so you've got plenty of time. And I'd just like to go around the edge of the folder, picking up the excess ink. It's a lovely technique, it's well worth taking the time to get it right and get it all cleaned up. There we go. And then just inside these large areas. Like I say, if you've got a folder that's got a little detail, you won't capture the background here. But this technique isn't a perfect one anyway. You're going to get a little bit of smudging, but it all adds to the lovely effect. Now what I'm going to do is very, very light mist with some plain water just over the top there, and that's just going to reinvigorate and kind of start to mould those inks together so they start blending. I'm going to take my plain white cardstock and I just pop it into the corner of the folder and I bring it down with the top there so there's no movement on the surface. As you turn that over you'll start to see you've got that impression, and I need to run this through my die cutting machine. Different folders take different plate combinations, so I'm going to take out the plate that I need to run this particular thickness of folder through. Let's just pop my Distress Oxides out of the way, and all this is going to do is really embed that ink into the paper, and with the water there to just help it react, you won't get sort of a blotchy image, you'll hopefully get a reasonably clear image. There we go, so always go forwards and back again. And if you want to, you can leave it to sit there a little bit longer. Now let's just take this out and have a look at that. Look at that, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. You see how subtle the inks are because it's just picked up on the detail and it's not a complete solid image. You've kind of picked out the outline. It's really, really beautiful for creating a card with. And if you don't like the effect you've always got the other side, which is the intended embossed image, but this is kind of the negative of it. So have some fun with that technique. Bring your inks to your embossing folders. Just so you know, you can simply run this under a tap as long as your embossing folder doesn't have any foam or metal in there, so like any die cutting elements to it, or any other sort of embossing that's with foam or rubber. As long as it's just the plastic embossing folder, you can run this under a tap. If not, you'll need to take a wet wipe or bit of wet kitchen towel to it, dry it thoroughly afterwards. That will clean it all up, ready to use another time without transferring that ink.